Hello, I'm August Lucas, and it's my pleasure to welcome one and all to the fourth of our free monthly virtual What Talks. As I hope you realise by now, the acronym WHAT stands for Waterside Hypotheses and Aquatic Theories, or whatever you like. This is because our focus here is on the apparently heretical idea that human evolution was more or less influenced by moving through and acquiring food from water. I say apparently heretical because, as Simon Bearder so beautifully told us in the second talk, simply mentioning the term aquatic ape hypothesis to a group of biological anthropologists is one sure way of upsetting them. Now, despite it being 50 years since Elaine Morgan so eloquently exposed the absurdities of the idea that Homo sapiens evolved out on the open, dry savannah with her bestseller, Descent of Woman, the Man, the Mighty Hunter idea has bizarrely resurfaced, reimagined as Man, the Mighty Marathon Runner by Dan Lieberman and co. And it's gained real popularity in the recent years. So it was good to watch Stephen Munro put it back in its place in the talk last month in January. Okay, so just before introducing this talk's guest speaker, Dr. Marc Verhaegen, I want to just do a quick demo to show people how easy it is to play any of the videos that we record and any of the talks. So the two that I've just been talking about, and of course today's talk and any in the future. So I'm just going to share my screen and just do a quick demo, hopefully to help people if they've had any problems with this. So basically you just need to go to a browser, any browser. This is Google Chrome, and what people always tempted to do is go to the actual Google itself and type it in here. Now, if you did that, it would work and you would certainly find it, but it's actually easier just to click in the address line at the top and just literally start typing. Now, because obviously I've done this a lot in the last few months, just typing in the W is enough for my computer, because it seems to remember that I do that a lot. But even if it's the first time you've ever done this, all you really need to do is just type in what talks and .com. So I was so lucky to get that URL. I can't believe I only applied for this, last September, and I would have bet my life that someone had already got that. But anyway, miraculously I was able to get it. So once you've done that and you hit enter, it's going to take you to our website. Now, the next time you went in there, I'm sure that would have remembered that, and you probably would be able to just type in W. If you go to other websites that start with W, maybe you have to type in a few more letters. But anyway, in the website then, you can see pretty early on in the screen, there's an introduction about the next talk that's coming up, and it'll always have like a countdown marker, so you know exactly when it's going to be. I usually put in one of these timeline maps so that you know whereabouts it is compared to everyone else. If you want to go to the YouTube channel, you just click this button and it will take you to the YouTube channel. And basically this will now, I'll mute my sound. If you go to one of the talks, you can then see the talk. I'm just going to pause it. This is Simon's talk. And underneath here, you can put in comments if you want to. So all of the talks are available there. If you prefer, you can do the same thing really on the website itself. So if you just click on the link at the top which says talks, and then scroll down, it shows you information about the forthcoming talk and any files that the presenter wants to share. I'll put them up here too. And then in descending order, it goes through the most recent talk. So this is Stephen's talk in January, and then we've got Simon's talk in December, and then and so on. So all the way back to the first talk that I gave in November. And then down at the bottom, you can see the schedule of forthcoming talks. So basically, it's really easy. And of course, all of these talks are going to be put up there for as long as hopefully the website can continue. And I just want to urge everyone, just please share this. Let's try and get this idea out there and more people interested in it. So let's now focus on today's speaker. Now, if Elaine Morgan deserves most credit for discovering and promoting Alister Hardy's more aquatic idea of human evolution, then a close second place would have to go to Marc Verhaegen. And of course, since Elaine's sad passing in 2013, and indeed for a few years before, Marc has been the most prolific proponent of these ideas. Let's not forget, it was Marc who, as an experienced GP, inspired one of Elaine's most impressive books, The Scars of Evolution, with its important reminder that fossil evidence isn't the only important trace of our evolutionary history. Clues are left in the tissues, both soft and hard, of our own bodies, and comparing those tissues with other mammals is also very important. Now, I don't know how many papers and book chapters Marc has written, but I personally have more than 20 of them, and they range on a whole variety of subjects, from bipedalism to speech, from water balance to heavy bones. Marc's ideas are well known in aquatic ape circles for their boldness and a strict adherence to the logic of comparative evidence. As I'm sure we'll hear, he does not agree to many of the dogmas that are taught as fact to students of biological anthropology, such as the position of Australopithecines as ancestors of Homo, and definitely not gorilla, chimpanzee, or any of the great apes. It's fair to say that Elaine and Marc disagreed about some of these points. To her, a more aquatic phase in the past seemed most powerful and eloquent in explaining why humans are so different from the chimpanzees. But to Marc, he saw some of the traits of the apes themselves as indicating a more aquatic past, such as their large size and loss of tail. Almost from the beginning, Marc thought that wading climbing was the likely mode of locomotion of the last common ancestor of the great apes, and that whereas we later perfected that bipedality, apes generally lost it. I must admit that for a few years I agreed with Elaine that this seemed to muddy the waters a little. But I did come round to Marc's views in 2000 with the discoveries of Orrorin and Sahelanthropus. Anyway, enough of this introduction, let's get to the talk itself. As always, please could I remind everyone to put their microphone on mute during Marc's talk and to make notes of any questions that you'd like to ask during it, ideally in the chat window. I'm hoping that there'll be about 20 minutes or more for questions and discussion at the end. I'll give Marc a little heads up with about 10 minutes to go. So without further delay, it now gives me great pleasure to introduce Dr. Marc Verhaegen.
Well, this is not about it's nothing to do with the Australopithecine, perhaps for another talk. This is only about archaic Homo, Homo erectus and Homo neanderthalensis, and diving. These are the points that I'm going to talk about. Savannah. Do everybody see the screen? Yes. First, I'm going to say that the savannah theory is nonsense. Then I'm going to say something about what did they eat, how did they dive, and how did they eat when diving, when did it happen, and where did it happen. And then I'm going to say a bit about Neanderthals and the transition from diving to wading and finally walking. The traditional assumption still is are very much Afro and anthropocentric. That means they reason very simplistic. Humans descend from some sort of chimpanzees. Chimpanzees live in the forests. Humans walk on land. Therefore, everything that discerns humans from chimpanzees has to do with leaving the forest for the open country. That means becoming bipedal, loss of fur, more sweating, meat eating, what chimpanzees don't. use of tools, etc. That is a simplistic thinking. That is still the traditional general meaning of many, probably most anthropologists, including paleoanthropologists. But of course, we don't descend from chimpanzees. For instance, we showed that humans never knuckle walked. Knuckle walking in chimpanzees and in gorillas is different. It's different embryologically, ontogenetically, and also anatomically, that chimpanzees walk more like this and gorillas more like that. And the timing when they achieve it embryologically is also different. So that means that chimpanzees and gorillas evolved knuckle walking in parallel, apart from each other, and that humans never ever had knuckle walking ancestors, which is still not generally accepted. Well, this is the Afro and anthropocentric interpretation. Chimpanzees live in forests, humans live on the ground. Therefore, everything has to be explained by this. That is a logical fallacy. It happened after this, therefore they think it happened because of this, which is, of course, a very sloppy interpretation, especially because we don't descend from chimpanzees. Chimpanzees and humans descend from a common ancestor about 5 million years ago. Well, human locomotion is special. It's bipedal. Not only bipedal, kangaroos and ostriches are also bipedal, but they are not vertical. We also have an upright spine, a vertebral column. This is also seen in gibbons in trees, in bonobos wading, like you see the picture. We see a bonobo wading bipedally in search of water lilies. Miocene apes, most Australopiths were probably also wading, climbing vertically. We also have tarsiers are more or less vertical and bipedal if they jump, but very different from our manner of locomotion. Vertical and bipedal are penguins outside the water, tarsiers like this one, that you see, gibbons when walking over branches sometimes, and as we said, in gorillas and chimpanzees, and especially bonobos, when they wade in forest swamps, gorillas wading for sedges, bonobos wading for water lilies, and so. Well, in short, the open plain hypothesis, well, there's nothing correct in it. They have problems. The fossils don't fit with open plain hypothesis. The very heavy bones, it means they were slow, they couldn't run fast. Stone tools are seen in sea otters and capuchin monkeys and hammering nuts in the trees, but not on the open plains. The paleo-environment is invariably, Homo erectus is invariably found at coast and riversides and lakesides. Dispersal, Homo erectus was found in Java and China. It has nothing to do directly with Africa. They have even reached Flores, so to islands. So it's difficult to understand that the savannah theory is still so generally accepted. Most fossils of Homo are fossilized with in the neighborhood of shellfish. The nutrition, our brains need a lot of foods, a lot of nutrients which are more prevalent in aquatic foods. The physiology, sweating. We sweat water and salt, both water and salt are scarce on the savannah. So nothing fits. The flat feet, so sometimes used to show that we are walkers or even runners, but all cursorial mammals have very long third and fourth or third alone, very long and strong digital rays, and totally unlike our feet or flat feet, or typically seen in wading and swimming, but never in running animals. Well, could they have dispersed along the coast? Yes, of course, why not? If we see the places where the Homo fossilized, from China to Java, later in East Africa, in the Caucasus and North Africa, well, they must have spread along the coast, and from the coasts inland along the rivers. Why not? How else? Not over the open sea to floras, etc. That's impossible. So human ancestors were no open plain dwellers, no endurance runners, certainly no specialized meat eaters, no rodeo cowboys, as some of them have called them. And there were certainly no top carnivores, as we will show later. These are unnecessary, just so speculations. I wrote a few years ago that the nowadays popular ideas about Pleistocene human ancestors running an open place, they have given it several names, but they are incredibly wrong hypotheses. Was Pleistocene Homo endurance running? Well, certainly not. It's not because of few populations with endurance runners that they are today that archaic Homo must have lived like this. There are even more populations where they are divers for shallow aquatic foods. Here is impossible physiologically, nutritionally. We are too fat and too heavy. We have, especially fossil Homo, has very dense and heavy bones. Sweating, I've already mentioned. Overheated fur seals also sweat water and cell when on land. And we have a very poor olfaction compared to nearly all other mammals except aquatic mammals. Cursorial mammals invariably run on their toes, on the tips of their toes, on their hooves, and none are plantigrade. And of course, you can run to Mojocartov, to Flores, and so. The famous article, which was published in Nature, leading journal, they incredibly published this endurance running article, but Bramble and Lieberman didn't even explain, didn't even consider the possibility of wading or diving. Well, this is, in short, this is nonsense, of course. So they didn't disperse running, but along the water. This is what we can call the coastal diaspora, the littoral theory. When they followed the water, did they feed on aquatic foods? Of course, why not? And they did this probably by wading and by diving. Seafoods, as you all know, are very rich in brain-specific nutrients, especially hexaenoic acid, but also other savannah foods are poor in these brain-specific nutrients. And shellfish are typically used by sea otters, for instance. They could have been used, or begin to use, to fracture the shell when floating on the water or at the beach, at the waterside, or perhaps when they were diving, we don't know for sure, to prevent the shellfish to close its shell underwater. There's two possibilities for stone use. When did this diaspora happen? Very likely it must have been happened early Pleistocene, possibly earlier, but it's difficult to know because we don't have fossils of Homo between when Homo and Pan split and before the Pleistocene. In the Pliocene, we don't have fossils of Homo. It was very likely not 10 or 5, even 5 million years ago, as thought by Hardy and Morgan at the time. Is there a connection with the ice ages, with the cooling? Well, likely, but we don't know for sure. The ice age coasts are now the coasts are underwater, so the fossil evidence is biased. So what happened during the Pleistocene, we still don't know for sure. Was there more shellfish with the ice ages? Was the lowering of the temperatures, was it an influence on the presence of shellfish? We don't know for sure. Well, at least I don't know for sure. This is the only slide with small text, but I think it's a very, very important slide. It's Homo erectus typically has pachyosteiosclerosis, heavy, thick bones and dense bones. These are two different adaptations which overlap. Every mammal that becomes an aquatic mammal first goes through a stage with pachyosteiosclerosis. First, we see thicker bones, and then soon thereafter, they develop heavier bones, and then the heavier bones can replace the thicker bones. And still a further stage when the animal becomes really aquatic. This is still in the terrestrial mammals that are becoming aquatic. But when they're really aquatic, they lose this again because they swim. Most of aquatic mammals swim very fast and they have very lightly built bones. So in Sirenians, in sea cows, we still see that because Sirenians collect non-moving foods. They don't have to swim fast. And they don't have to dive deep. So we may be sure that there's no doubt, in my opinion, that Homo erectus was a slow and shallow diver. All they say, the Bufferinil and co-authors, they say that these stages of pachyosteiosclerosis are a mandatory passage in the history of marine tetrapods. Especially in marine aquatics. In freshwater animals, it is less necessary because the reason why they become heavier is, of course, because it's not only in mammals, it's also in birds, aquatic birds, reptiles, amphibians, etc. And all tetrapods that become aquatic all go through this stage. It has an hydrostatic role. Aquatic mammals are often fat. They have a subcutaneous fat layer, and this has to be compensated by to be about as dense as the water. In order to dive, you have to be about as dense as the water, so they need this stage, and that is exactly what we see in Homo erectus. Well, it's very beautifully illustrated by the Petralona skull. It was found 300 meters above sea level, but At the time when Petralona lived, it was probably at sea level. And they have very, very large paranasal sinuses around the nose, very lightly built, but the occiput, the posterior part of the skull, is extremely dense. And this strongly suggests that these people frequently floated with a heavy skull in the water and the nose just above the water. Well, in 1985, I finally managed to get published an article that was written perhaps more than 5 years before that already. And it was thanks to Jan Wind, was a strong opponent of ours, but he was so honest as to help me with getting this published in a rather obscure journal, Medical Hypothesis. Well, this reconstruction may be ludicrous at first sight, but it's simply based on everything we know about Homo erectus. I had nothing to do special to reach at this reconstruction. A smaller brain size, a very long and low skull. The foramen magnum is more dorsally. In Homo sapiens, in us, it's more underneath the skull. And here it was still perhaps, oh, sorry. Oh, yeah. Was still a bit more backwards. The foramen magnum, the receding forehead, a very low and flat skull. The tibia, the shin bone, was a bit shorter in Homo erectus. I sketched a rather fat-bellied Homo erectus. There was no basicranial flexion at the skull in Homo erectus has a, well, I have here, perhaps you can see this on the small screen. While in Homo, the skull basis is more flexed, and in Homo erectus it was longer, and so that the skull turned, the head, the face turned more forward. We had a flat skull, the platycephaly. We had a very broad pelvis in Homo erectus, with flaring ilia for the thighs, for the legs to move laterally, certainly not for running. Platymeria means a flat and flat femur, the thigh bone, with long femoral necks, also for sidewards movements of the legs. And then I sketched the male hair distribution upon this, the baldness, as many of us have. The neck hairs don't grow as long as in women. The mustache and the beard, you come automatically to a very remarkably streamlined body. Some say that the littoral theory is wrong because humans can't sleep floating, and that it was dangerous for the predators on the beach. Did they sleep, for instance, amid kelp? Well, most of us probably can't, but some humans are able to sleep on floating on the water, and it might have been possible. The legs were less heavy than the rest. They were fatter than most of us. The skull was turned more upwards, the flat skull and the projecting mid-face, the prognatism it is called. that the mid-face was much more forward, and they possibly had a large nose. If you want to know more about this, simply Googled "Oi, big nose." There's a paper one page only I wrote in the New Scientist. You can easily find it on the internet. So all this suggests that Homo erectus simply went between China and Java and East Africa, simply following along the coast in salty waters. The paranasal sinuses are largest in in Neanderthals. That suggests that Neanderthals lived more than Homo erectus in fresh water. And Homo erectus had small paranasal sinuses, probably because they dived more than the other ones. And when we see the heaviness of the bones, is the opposite. Homo erectus was very heavy. Homo neanderthal lost this partly, and we are still more lightly built than archaic Homo. Well, why do we have a philtrum? A philtrum is, as far as I know, is unique to humans. Why do we have this nipple between in the upper lip? It's not necessary for anything. But when we think that Homo erectus had a prognatic face with forward, more forward cheekbones, especially the upper bone, the maxilla, and with possibly a bigger nose. Then when they dived, the nose was almost automatically closed by the water pressure. It's an hypothesis, but I think it's very realistic. Well, there's another illustration of from my book. It's only in Dutch, my book. It's the same as the other one. And the place where acnea, the sebaceous follicles are typically just below the longer hairs, probably to grease the hairs to make them more streamlined. It's curious that and these are caused head hair distribution and the acnea and the sebaceous follicles are caused by testosterone, dihydrotestosterone in humans, and that is not seen in women. That's very curious. That suggests that the women were less diving than the males. Elaine Morgan suggested that the female head hairs floated on the surface of the water so the baby could grasp them, and probably also died, but possibly less than the men. This also suggests that our ancestors at the time were monogamous. The man more diving and bringing food to his wife and children. Well, that we still can, every human can learn to swim underwater and dive with ease. Even children can do this. I never have seen children running after antelopes for endurance running and so, but swimming is something else. Oh, Wim, kom eens. Ik heb iets verkeerd gedaan.
Mark, can you just wrap it up in about 8 minutes?
Okay, I have to go.
No, carry on. You got about 10 minutes.
Ik moet terug naar dingen. Stop share.
You can carry on sharing.
Okay, thank you.
Carry on, just another 10 minutes though, please.
Nee, dat is veel verkeerd, jongen. Ben ik verkeerd aan het doen? Ja, well, the littoral dispersal, I'm going to a bit faster, very large lungs, the brain, and especially I think the very heavy bones is only seen. The paleo environment is seen in, is also clear when they are not preoccupied by finding fossils in savannas and in Africa. Everything shows that our ancestors were waterside and early Pleistocene probably seaside. Well, we have the shell engravings found by Stephen Munro in the collection of the Bois of the Java fossils of Homo erectus. And now I'm going to say a bit about Neanderthals and the transition from diving to wading and finally to walking. Were they even scavenging? Probably not very much in view of our poor olfaction. Neanderthals were typically found next to water lilies. Were they eating cattails, water lilies, shellfish probably, and later probably salmon. They were possibly following the salmon for the year-round track of the salmon. The brittle skeleton, there were certainly no rodeo cowboys. They were slow for running. They had Neanderthal skulls have a very big nose. And then it's sometimes used as carbon and nitrogen isotopes to show that we were super carnivores. But of course, you can't be more carnivorous than cats and felids. So these isotopes, CNN isotopes, were simply intermediate between marine and freshwater foods, which the authors didn't even consider. And did they hunt Neanderthals? There's only one certain, reasonably certain case of hunting, and it was lakeside. Of course, they could have eaten flesh or carrion that they found next to the water. Why not? But that doesn't mean they were hunters. The lifestyle, I've said it already, the large lungs, they suggest they frequently, they still dived because of their ear exostosis in many Neanderthal skills, which are only exclusively caused by diving in colder water. So there is no doubt about this. Also, the coprolites, the stool stones they found of Neanderthals fit best with they having eaten shellfish and plants. All evidence suggests that Neanderthals were diving and wading wetland omnivores. And I think they seasonally followed the river to the coast. Well, this is the famous article of Richards where they try to show that Neanderthals were super carnivores, but you can't be more carnivorous than real carnivores. And for some reason, they hadn't considered that Neanderthals were simply halfway between freshwater and marine waters, as we still are. We don't have these data on Homo erectus as far as we know, but this simply proves that we were between fresh and marine waters. Wow, this is the same. And in a case, a small gut as humans have and a large brain, that already suggests seafood. Now, the transition from erectus to sapiens probably went through a phase of wading. Humans, as compared to erectus, we have longer legs, we have narrower pelvises, less lateral movements of the thighs. The femoral neck, which you see here, is very vulnerable. Hip fractures usually happen here. and it is a relicivore swimming past. The skull, as I already said, or eyes are directed more looking ventrally, more the place of the foramen magnum says the same. We have flatter faces, smaller noses. Our brains are more placed above our eyes, less than behind the eyes, as in erectus and Neanderthals. Well, we see the same. The foramen magnum in Neanderthals is at the back of the skull, and Homo erectus is very inferior. And we have the high forehead and the retreating and long, flat, low skull of erectus. The big nose, you see it well, very well here. The chin, which hinders the streamlining, but which is better for the masticatory muscles. The conclusions, well, yes, the endurance running ideas are nonsense. There's not the slightest doubt that Homo erectus regularly dived, very likely in seawater. What did I dive for? Seaweeds, perhaps, but likely mostly for shellfish in view of their shell use. I didn't speak about this, but our Gene Stokes rhythm of that is sometimes seen in people with breathing problems is 90 seconds. So it's possible that this diving cycle of Homo erectus was typically 90 seconds. And that Homo erectus seasonally followed the rivers inland. And we, of course, we have a further, instead of following the rivers and perhaps chasing salmon or so, we have the same posture, but now we walk. We have to walk instead of on 4 legs. We have to walk on 2 legs on land. Well, this is the main proponents we have here. I've seen the son of Elaine is here. And then David Attenborough also. And this is a wall painting that somebody has made 10 meters behind my garden. And these are a few of my grandchildren with David Attenborough. Okay, I have, but I'm not going to speak about this. I think my time is up. The references you can find on the other slides.
I'll put the PowerPoint on the website if that's okay with you, Mark.
Okay.
And then if anyone wants to get any of the detail of that, they will be able to. Well, look, thank you very much, Mark.
I hope I was a bit clear. I have no idea. You can't see the reactions of the people, but I hope everything. The essence, of course, is that there's not the slightest doubt that Homo erectus frequently dived and did not run after antelopes over some African savannah. That is absolutely clear, I think. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Mark. Okay, well, look, I just want to basically thank Mark for that. I hope everyone can everyone see me now? Yeah, okay. So basically what I want to do is open up for questions. So I noticed that we have got Michel Odont here again, and last meeting I very rudely cut him off when he was about to ask a question. So Michel, if you want to get ready to ask a question and share your screen, I'd like to hear from you today if possible. Has anyone else got a question that they want to ask? I'm going to put Malgorzata on first because she made a point in the chat. So Malgorzata first, and if anyone else wants to say something, please just indicate somehow and I will put you on next. But I think the chat would be the good place to do it, because I can keep an eye on the chat while the talk is going on. So, Małgorzata, do you want to go first?
Yes, it was actually just a comment, because I recently read in, well, not really even a scientific, it was just a very popular kind of promotion of a book by I can't remember the name, De Silva, about this endurance running, which he, I understand, calls persistent hunting. I'm retranslating from Polish. And I was really surprised how it catches on, and I wonder if anybody has any idea why this is so persistent in spite of being, you know, so not supported. One of the things he mentions is that, you know, our profuse sweating would be the, you know, supporting this. This is one of the things that make this persistent running possible, and prevent heat strokes, which is for me quite amazing, because as far as I understand, it's just humans that get heat stroke in the first place at all. So there is really nothing to prevent. And I'm wondering if anybody, there is a mention of this in Elaine's book, either in The Scars or in Descent of Woman. I can't remember at the moment, but I wonder if anybody wrote anything more about human sweating that would make some sense, and not like, you know, praising that it's so profuse and so good, because, you know, as Elaine notices, that this only dehydrates us very effectively, which is not a prevention of heat stroke. I don't know if you have any. Sorry, this is not that much of, you know, to, you know, this is only a little bit related to Marc, to Marc's
bit, yes.
speak, but this is part of this endurance running thing, which really puzzles me, the popularity of this, because I see absolutely no point for it. So
Yeah,
if anybody can refer me to anything on sweating, I'd be very grateful.
Yeah, it is strange how that's got popular again. It's Dan Lieberman's the person behind it. Marc, do you have any reason, any thought of why it's become popular again?
It's incredible that it's so popular. It's real nonsense. The only animals I know that regularly sweat water and salt are sea lions, overheated sea lions. When they're lying on the beach, they sweat to cool down, but I don't know any other animals that do this. When you live in the savannah and you have to sweat water and salt, that's the worst thing you can do. So,
and I think this is funny, because incredible. They say that this is exceptional and this is what makes us so good on savannah, which is, you know, a nonsense atop of nonsense. That's
it's really nonsense. Yes.
It's really frustrating.
Yeah, it is frustrating.
We need it in the savannah, of course, but we need it because we were aquatic. We were
yes, exactly. But that's because we were aquatic and because we have no fur to protect us.
Sea lions do it, not in the savannah, but on the beach. We do it also on the beach when we are overheated. We do it everywhere.
Okay, I'd like to bring in Francesca next, because Francesca's got a question on the menopause, and I think that's an interesting point that hasn't been made before. So do you want to ask your question, and then Marc, do you want to have a go at answering it?
Okay, well, actually, I was going to say, relevant to the previous question, maybe Gareth should speak first, because I think he wanted to answer about the sweating. He's got some things to say about that, and then I can come back to the menopause.
Okay.
Is he there? He mentioned in the comments that he wanted to say something.
I've written a bit of my book in Dutch on this. Well, I think the menopause is when testosterone becomes higher in women, and they also get a bit of more hair loss on the top and more beard, and so this is possibly a relic of a former phase when the women, when they had older children, also more frequently dived, just like the Homo erectus we have seen here. That is a relic, I think, of marine or waterside or littoral past. But it's,
In reference to,
or the speculative. I've written it in my book, but I've not written it elsewhere, I believe.
yeah, I mentioned it because when you mentioned about the Homo erectus, maybe the males were diving more than the females. I mean, Elaine had mentioned menopause as well, and it only occurs in 4 other aquatic species, humans and Asian elephants, which also seem to have an aquatic connection. And it's not just that halfway through life, women stop being able to reproduce, which is so unique anyway in the animal kingdom. It's also associated with increased fat, especially upper body fat in women after menopause, loss of estrogen, therefore loss of bone density. All of these things seem to be showing that women as grandmothers would have been more likely floating on the surface and supporting the babies, while probably their daughters, the mothers of the babies, were diving or collecting shell food as well. So it probably wasn't just a male and female division of labor. We know that Japanese ama dive as well. They're very good divers. Yeah, possibly the males went deeper than the women.
Extended families, larger families with monogamous pairs possibly, but related in larger groups. Well, that's speculative. Yes.
Okay, Gareth, could you go next? You've been waiting for quite a while. Would you like to ask your question or make your points? Gareth?
Is my microphone on?
Hello, Gareth.
Yeah, I wasn't going to talk about sweating. One point, Mark, just 2 other things. Mark raised the question, were there more shellfish or were there enough shellfish during the ice ages? I've looked into that, and the best estimates were that tropical seas may have cooled by as much as 5 degrees. Now, the sea around the United Kingdom is very much colder than that. And there is a huge shellfish industry today. We're very much colder than that. So I have no doubt that during ice ages, marine resources were plentiful. The other thing I'd just like to mention while I've got a chance is Elaine's statue is now going to be unveiled on the 18th of March in her hometown of Mountain Ash. If anybody can possibly attend, drop me a line and I'll send you details when I get them. That's it. Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you.
That's really great news. I heard that just the other day myself. So, is Michelle, are you with us, Michelle? This is now the 3rd time I've tried to get Michelle to say a few words, and every time I've messed it up. So, Michelle, if you can hear me, if you would like to contribute and say a few words, this is your chance. Please do so. It's deja vu, I'm afraid. Well, okay. Anybody else? If anybody else wants to make a question, I have one. Okay, this is my I have to say my sort of only sort of problem with the idea that Homo erectus is the most aquatic in our lineage. Is basically if they were bottom divers and quite adept swimmers and divers, it begs the question, why is there no evidence of Homo erectus in Australia or past the Wallace line or in America? Because Homo erectus has been around for 1.8 million years, and I've always kind of had a bit of a question about that. If they were so good at swimming, they would surely have crossed the Wallace line and inhabited the whole coast of Australia, New Zealand, up the coast into the past the Bering Straits, and we would see evidence of Homo erectus in North America, South America, just like Homo sapiens. So how do you answer that problem, Mark?
Well, they were not so good. I said they were just beginning. Every tetrapod that goes from terrestrial to aquatic goes through a stage of slow and shallow diving. And that's the first stage. But real aquatic animals, we were no real aquatic animals. They have the seals and cetaceans, they are lightly boned. The opposite of Homo erectus. The first stage is thicker bones, then denser bones, and when they become deeper divers or faster divers of the prey, they lose this completely, and the bones become the opposite. The bones become almost osteoporotic because they can swim faster then. This Homo erectus was only a very slow and shallow diver at the most. There were no beginning aquatics, yes, but not good enough probably for reaching. They did reach Flores, which is not so easy. It's an island, I believe, 50 kilometers over water. So they were excellent aquatic mammals, but not like seals or cetaceans. They were only beginning and only slow divers, shallow divers. Certainly no high sea divers, high sea swimmers.
Thank you, Mark. Simon, you had your hand raised for a second. Do you want to say a comment? You're on mute.
Mark, thank you very much for a very interesting talk. I wondered about your views on Australopithecus. You said you would leave them out of this talk and give us another one later. But what do you think was their use of water? Because they were clearly partially upright, fully able to walk on their hind legs, and their teeth had changed from having dagger-like canines to reduced canine size. So they must have had a change of diet to cause that. What are your views about their use of water?
Well, that's another, possibly the subject of another talk. It's much too extensive to speak about it here. But they were, if you Google aquarboreal, aquarboreal. Aqua is water and arboreal is trees. Aquarboreal ancestors. That was our paper in a trends journal, and that explains most of it. They were, you have seen the photo of the wading bonobo I showed in one of the slides. They were most likely waders, upright waders, bipedal already, and climbing arms overhead in the branches above the water. There were swamp, they lived probably in swamp forests. And after we had suggested that, and they found the wading gorillas, the lowland gorillas, who waded after sedges and so. At the time I thought, now everybody will see that we were right, but as usual, nothing happened at all. If you Google aquarboreal,
thank you.
You can find most.
I'll do that.
And the problem is gorillas and chimpanzees, they both evolved in parallel to become what they are now. And that's difficult to understand for many people. So they say we had knuckle walking ancestors because chimpanzees knuckle walk, they are our closest relatives. Gorillas are further relatives and they also knuckle walk. Therefore, humans must also have knuckle walked. But that's certainly not so. We never knuckle walked. The chimpanzees and gorillas have evolved a lot in parallel, and that's difficult to understand for many people. But parallel evolution, well, we see we are full of parallels, or fur loss or fat layer seen in other aquatic mammals. So evolution is always full of parallels, and that's difficult to understand for many people. That's one of the reasons I think that our theories are not generally accepted.
Thank you, Mark. Now we're getting close to running out of time here, but I've noticed that we've got Mel and Dash from Florida. I think it's Florida, from the USA, and so she must have got up really early in the morning to join us. Thank you very much for that. And we've also got Boleslav Shemansky. I probably said that wrong, but I don't know if any of the newcomers want to say a word. Maybe they've gone to. All right. Well, look, I'm going to call it a day then and close the meeting. So thank you very much. I'm going to stop recording. If everyone wants to carry on chatting, that's fine. I'm not going to throw anyone off and end the meeting formally, but I'm just going to stop recording now. So thanks very much,
Thank
Mark.
you, Mark.
Great talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Algis, and everybody. Thank you.
Thanks,
very
Mark.
much.
That's great.
Interesting.